Hey guys, so in this video I want to talk about variables within MATLAB. And in earlier lectures I said that you could use anything you wanted for variables, and to the most extent this is true. However, there are some rules and some traditions that we should follow when making variables. So the first thing I'd like to go over are what are good variables. And well, the best variables are variables that describe the purpose of the data they hold. So what they should do is the variables should remind you about the importance of the data. That way, when you're rereading through code, you can easily understand what these variables mean and what they're used for in the program. So I've provided two good examples. So this first one is the adjacency matrix. And so that describes the type of matrix this is. It's an adjacency matrix. You'll also note that I've spaced out each word with an underscore. That's also good programming practice. It's better to have an underscore between words for readability. This is also acceptable not having the underscore, but it's just slightly harder to read. Either one is fine. I prefer the underscore, just because of the slightly better readability. Here's another good example. This one uses three words, and again, separated by semicolons, but again, describing the purpose. So I can't stress it enough. The best variable names describe the purpose of the data they hold. That way, it's easy for readability and understandability. Now let's go over some bad variable names, and these relate to some of the rules of MATLAB. So the bad examples that I've given are generic type names, one character names, names that start with numbers, names that start with capital letters, and all capital letter names. And so some of these are tradition and some of these are rules, but for the most part we should stay away from these type of variables. So I've given a few of these examples. So the first one is a generic type name, and I've called the variable stuff. Now that's an absolutely terrible name, because what is stuff for? We don't know. It doesn't describe the purpose. It's always good to have the purpose, because if you name variables like stuff, when you come and reread your code, you're going to have no idea what stuff is used for. It's an absolutely meaningless name. The next one is one character names. And this is more of a tradition within programming. It's better to have a longer name just for readability, right? Because it's harder to understand what X is. It doesn't give the entire purpose. I would argue sometimes that having one character names is the best variable name. Maybe you've named you have a Y equation or a Y matrix, and you should name it Y. It really doesn't make sense, but this is a part of tradition. Don't use one character names. This next one, names that start with numbers, is actually an illegal type of variable within MATLAB. So if I was to uncomment this and try running it, MATLAB's going to error out. It gets confused. You're not able to actually start variables with numbers. You can put numbers at the end of variables, and that's okay. But you can't put numbers at the beginning of variables. MATLAB just won't accept it. So that's a bad variable name. The next one is names that start with capital letters, and this is purely tradition. For some reason, programmers like to have variables with all lowercase letters, and so having an uppercase at the beginning just irks people. And so it's really not that big of a deal, but it's just programming tradition, so I would suggest staying away from it. And then the final variable name you should stay away from is all capital letter names. And that's because all capital letter names have actually a special meaning within programming, and these are called constants. And so constants are just variables, but they're variables that you make a promise not to change within your programs. So what you do is you would write constants with all capital letters at the top of your program. So what you do is you would write output mat at the very, very top of your program like this. And then all programmers will innately understand that since you put this in capital letters, you've agreed not to change its value of 20 in your entire program. So if you were not using a variable as a constant, you should not put it in all capital letters. And this is purely because of tradition. You could do this and write it and change it within your program, but it's not tradition and it will confuse other programmers who have to read your code. So again, it's a bad variable name. But the final thing I'd like to stress is that all these rules are not steadfast. If you think your variable name provides the best understanding of the variable and the data it holds, absolutely go with that variable name. These rules aren't the end-all be-all. So guys, I'll see you in the next one.